This is the woman who keeps your husband warm when you are busy crying and nagging. You see that beautiful red sofa in your living room? That's our favorite spot. Maybe you should stop calling. He doesn't need you anymore." She ended the call with a wicked smile. Vivian's knees weakened as a reality hit her. Her husband wasn't just cheating, he had handed her place to another woman. Joseph bent over the dumpster at the back of the market, sweat glistening on his forehead as he dug through scraps of wood and rusted things. His hands were rough, his once polished shoes now covered in dust. He was searching for anything useful, something he could carry home to make life a little easier for Esther. That was when his eyes caught it, a bright red sofa, turned slightly on the side, sitting awkwardly among the garbage. He paused, stunned. Even in its state, it looked too fine to be abandoned. With effort, he dragged it out, whispering to himself, "Esther would love this." But he had no idea that this sofa carried more than comfort. It carried destiny. As Joseph struggled to push the sofa onto a wheelbarrow, memories flooded him like a shadow from the past. Not long ago, his life had been different. He once wore ironed shirts, a tie knotted neatly around his neck, and worked as a banker. His neighbors respected him. His colleagues admired his dedication. But everything began to crumble the night a faulty wire at their small apartment sparked a fire. The flames devoured everything: clothes, documents, furniture, cherished family photos. Joseph had barely pulled Esther outside before the roof collapsed. Their home, their memories, their savings, everything was gone in minutes. But the fire was just the beginning. Weeks later, his bank announced retrenchments. Joseph was one of the unlucky names on the list. The manager avoided eye contact as he handed him the letter. No severance, no help, just polite dismissal. Joseph left the office with trembling hands and a heavy heart. When he told Esther that night, she simply held him close. "We will survive," she whispered, though her voice shook. But surviving meant moving into an uncompleted building at the edge of town. No doors, no windows, only cement blocks and mosquitoes at night. They spread a mat on the floor and told themselves it was temporary. Now dragging the red sofa into that broken shelter, Joseph felt a spark of dignity return. Esther's face lit up when she saw it. "At least we will sit like human beings again," she had said, cleaning off the dust with her wrapper. They laughed together, sitting side by side, as if the sofa carried back a piece of the life they once had. But neither of them knew that this sofa had its own story. One that began in a mansion across town, in the home of a man named Matthew. Matthew had once been a respected lawyer. In his early years, he was known for defending the poor, standing boldly in court with passion in his voice. That was when Vivian, his wife, loved him the most. They had little money, but their love was plenty. They took long walks, shared roasted corn on the roadside, and dreamt of better days. But politics came calling, and Matthew could not resist. He rose quickly, his sharp tongue winning him favor, and soon the wealth started to pour in. Mansions, cars, and endless parties. But with money came arrogance, and with arrogance came corruption. Vivian watched the man she loved transform into a stranger. Late nights became frequent, excuses piled up, and she noticed the faint smell of other women's perfume on his shirts. Their marriage once a sweet melody, became a battlefield of silence and suspicion. Vivian fought to hold on to him, but Matthew was consumed by power and worse, by the company of women who flattered him. Among the women who circled Matthew, Jessica stood out. She was daring, bold, and unafraid of anyone, including Vivian. One evening in their hotel hideout, Matthew lay on the bed, complaining bitterly. "Vivian never stops nagging me," he muttered, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "Every day, it's one thing or another. She doesn't understand me anymore." Jessica slid closer, her lips curled in a sly smile. "Forget about her, baby," she whispered, stroking his arm. "She doesn't know your worth. Let me take care of you. You don't need to stress when you have me." Her words suited his ego, and in that moment, Matthew felt like the king he pretended to be. But Jessica's boldness would later ignite the spark that would change everything. The breaking point came when Vivian called Matthew one evening, furious that he had skipped yet another dinner. Jessica, lounging with a glass of wine in hand, boldly picked up his phone. "Hello," she said smoothly. Vivian froze. "Who is this?" Jessica chuckled softly. "This is the woman who keeps your husband warm when you are busy crying and nagging. You see that beautiful red sofa in your living room? That's our favorite spot. Maybe you should stop calling. He doesn't need you anymore." She ended the call with a wicked smile. Vivian's knees weakened as a reality hit her. Her husband wasn't just cheating, he had handed her place to another woman. That night, Vivian waited for Matthew like a storm building in the sky. The moment he stepped in, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, she exploded. "So now your mistress answers my calls?" she shouted, her voice trembling with fury. Matthew, startled, tried to wave her off. "Vivian, don't start tonight," he muttered, loosening his tie, but she wasn't having it. "Don't you dare dismiss me. Do you know how humiliating it is to hear another woman mock me on my husband's phone?" Matthew snapped, his voice rising. "And so what? Must you always nag? You drive me out with your constant suspicion." Vivian's eyes filled with tears as she shot back. "Suspicion? The whole world knows you are drowning with women, Matthew. You've destroyed the man I married." Their shouting echoed through the mansion like thunder. Matthew finally grabbed his car key, face hot with anger. "I can't breathe in this house," he barked, storming out and slamming the door behind him. Vivian stood there shaking, her chest heaving. Fury consumed her as her eyes fell on the red sofa, the very seat where she knew that Matthew had entertained Jessica and other women. In that moment, she made her decision. "You love the sofa more than me, right? You use the sofa to entertain your numerous girlfriends. Let me hurt you where it pains the most," she hissed. She ordered the staff to drag it outside. "Throw it away. I never want to see that cursed sofa ever again." The sofa thudded onto the street, left like a carcass. Vivian desperately wanted her husband to feel the same sting of loss she felt. She didn't know that she had just thrown away his future. Matthew didn't return that night or the next. For 3 long days, Vivian wandered around the mansion alone, her anger turning into bitterness. She replayed their fight over and over, her heart aching, but her pride refusing to bend. When Matthew finally returned, his face was pale, his clothes was rumpled. He stormed into the living room, desperate to collapse onto his favorite spot, but he froze when he saw the empty space, his eyes darting widely. "Where is my sofa?" he demanded. The maid hesitated, trembling. "Madame asked us to throw it away." The word struck him like a bullet. His mouth fell open as he staggered forward, as if the ground had betrayed him. "What?" he roared, clutching his head. "Do you people know what you've done?" He turned to Vivian, his voice cracking with rage. "That sofa carried my future, Vivian. My savings, my life." Vivian's voice drained of color, her anger dissolving into horror, but by then it was too late. The red sofa was gone. While Matthew clutched his head in despair, fate was already playing its hand elsewhere. On the same day he stormed back into his mansion, Joseph was dragging the red sofa into the uncompleted building he and Esther had called home. Sweat drenched his shirt as he struggled to maneuver it through the rough doorway. Esther's eyes widened the moment she saw it. "Joseph, where did you find this?" she exclaimed. Joseph, panting, managed a smile. "By the market dumpsters. It was just sitting there. I thought, why not bring it home?" For the first time in months, Esther's laughter returned. The sofa immediately transformed their cold, bare space. Esther wiped it clean and sat down with a sigh, leaning back as though the sofa carried away months of hardship. "Ah, Joseph," she said, tears brimming, "we may be living in blocks and dust, but at least tonight we sit like human beings again." Joseph joined her on the sofa and they held each other, both savoring that small comfort. They had no idea that their laughter echoed from cushions stuffed with enough money to change their entire destiny. Days passed. One evening, as Joseph shifted on the sofa, he heard a faint crinkling sound beneath him. He frowned and pressed down again. There it was, like paper crunching. Curious, he pushed his hand into the torn seam and felt something unusual. He pulled out a bundle wrapped tightly in a rubber band. His heart skipped. Tearing it open, he froze. "Esther, come," he whispered. Esther knelt down beside him, and together they stared at crisp bundles of foreign currencies. Dollars, pounds, euros, more money than they had ever seen in their lives. Esther gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Joseph, where did this come from? Is this not blood money?" she whispered, trembling. Joseph shook his head slowly, equally stunned. "I don't know, but it was inside the sofa." "Esther, do you realize what this means? We can rebuild our lives." Still, his hands shook as he set the money on the mat. "Joseph, this can't be real money," Esther whispered. "It's real, Esther. Maybe God has finally remembered us," Joseph replied, his voice breaking. They both sat in silence, overwhelmed by the weight of the discovery. The red sofa had become both a blessing and a question they weren't sure they could answer. That night, neither of them slept. Esther paced back and forth, whispering prayers, while Joseph sat on the edge of the sofa, staring at the bundles. At dawn, he made a decision. "We will not waste this. We will not live carelessly. This is our second chance, Esther. We must use it wisely." Esther nodded, still fearful, but trusting her husband's resolve. They buried most of the bundles inside the ground, covering it with sand, keeping only a small amount to buy food and necessities. Their living began to change, little by little. Joseph started a small car wash near a busy road, hiring 2 boys from the neighborhood. Esther, with her careful hands, invested in something she had always dreamt of, a mini grocery store. She stocked rice, beans, cooking oil, sachet milk, and soft drinks. At first, it was just a small wooden shop, but her honesty and warm smile drew customers quickly. Madam Esther's shop became the go-to place for mothers and workers alike. Soon, she was turning in daily profits, and for the first time in years, Joseph and Esther could breathe without the fear of tomorrow. Back on the other side of town, Matthew was losing his mind. He called in favors, bribed waste collectors, even hired young boys to comb through dump sites. "Find me that sofa," he barked. But days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of it. Vivian, wrecked by guilt, followed him on his frantic searches. At one dump site, she broke down in tears. "Matthew, I didn't know. I was only trying to hurt you, not to destroy us." He looked at her with burning eyes. "You have finished me, Vivian. You have finished us." Their mansion, once full of noise and luxury, now rang with bitterness and regret. Matthew's political allies began to notice his distraction. Deals slipped through his finger. His once proud image crumbled. Vivian watched as her husband, who once stood tall in power, now sat hunched, muttering to himself about the red sofa. She too was tormented. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jessica's smug smile, heard her mocking voice, and remembered the rash anger that had made her throw out the one thing Matthew loved the most. Their finances dwindled. Without his secret stash, Matthew was forced to rely only on his official income. Extravagant parties stopped. Trips abroad ceased. Their staff began to resign when salaries were delayed. Vivian found herself cooking simple meals in the kitchen, something she hadn't done in years. At first, she hated it, but as she stirred a pot of beans one night, she realized she hadn't felt this close to her husband in a long time. Matthew, humbled, sat at the dining table, quietly eating. The silence between them was no longer sharp, it was healing. Meanwhile, Joseph and Esther moved carefully. They didn't flaunt their blessings, but quietly built stability. Joseph expanded the car wash with more equipment, while Esther grew her mini grocery store into a small but busy outlet that served the whole neighborhood. They saved, invested, and prayed, determined never to return to the hunger and despair of their past. Neighbors admired their rise, assuming it came from sheer hard work and divine favor. Only the red sofa in their modest living room knew the truth. Sometimes, Joseph would sit on the sofa at night and run his hands over the fabric, whispering to himself, "This is the seat of destiny." Esther, though, always prayed silently, asking God for forgiveness if the money had come from a wrong source. "But God," she whispered one night, "we will use it to do good. We will not waste it. Please forgive us." Her prayers gave her peace, and Joseph's determination gave her courage. In contrast, Matthew's nights were restless. He dreamt of the sofa being dragged away, of faceless strangers tearing open its cushions. He would wake up drenched in sweat, cursing himself and Vivian. One night, he confessed, "Vivian, that money was everything. Without it, I am nothing." She touched his hand gently for the first time in years. "Matthew, you were never supposed to hide your life from me. Maybe this is our chance to start again." Her words softened him, and for a brief moment, he saw the woman he had once loved with all his heart. Jessica, the mistress who once flaunted her power, grew tired of Matthew's inability to afford her lavish lifestyle. She stopped answering his calls, found a richer man, and vanished from his life. Ironically, her betrayal was the final push Matthew needed to reflect. He sat with Vivian one evening and said quietly, "All this time, I chased shadows. You were the only one who stayed." Vivian's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in years, they held hands again. Joseph and Esther now lived in their modest two-bedroom apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. They furnished it with simple pride. Beds, curtains, a dining set, and in the middle of their living room sat the red sofa, clean and polished, still carrying the secrets of their rise. Every time Joseph looked at it, he remembered the fire, the hunger, the tears, and he thanked God for this mysterious turn of fortune. Their businesses flourished. Joseph ventured into a small car rental service, while Esther's grocery store grew into a community staple. She added shelves of spices, detergent, and even frozen foods, hiring 2 assistants to help her. Customers trusted her so much that some bought goods in advance. The couple's lives transformed quietly but steadily. They never bragged, never wasted, never forgot the nights they went to bed hungry on a bare mat. To them, the money wasn't for luxury, it was for survival, for building, and for giving their future children a life of dignity. Back at the mansion, Matthew and Vivian sold off their luxury cars, keeping only one. They let go of their staff, learning to manage on their own. At first, it was humiliating, but slowly it drew them closer. They began to laugh at small things again, like they used to when they were younger. Vivian teased him as he struggled to fix a broken bulb, and he teased her when she overcooked rice. Their home, though smaller in spirit, was warmer than it had been in years. One evening, Matthew sat with Vivian and admitted, "Maybe the sofa was a curse. I was too obsessed with hiding money, with chasing women, with pretending to be untouchable. Losing it has forced me to see you again, my dear wife." Vivian rested her head on his shoulder. "Maybe I threw it away out of anger, but God used it to throw away our pride too." They both smiled faintly, knowing they had lost wealth but regained something priceless, their bond. Joseph too reflected often. He sometimes wondered whose money it had been, but he pushed the thought aside, telling himself it was destiny. Esther, the ever-spiritual one, encouraged him to use part of it to help others. They began sponsoring 2 children in the neighborhood through school and giving food to the homeless. Slowly, their blessings spread beyond their home. Years passed, and both couples lived different but transformed lives. Joseph and Esther became symbols of resilience in their community, humble, hardworking, and generous. Matthew and Vivian, stripped of excesses, rediscovered each other and rekindled their long-lost love. The mansion was no longer loud with parties. It was filled with genuine laughter and quiet companionship. In the end, resting quietly in a modest apartment was a red sofa, carrying the secrets of 2 families. What one threw away in anger became another's salvation, and what one lost in wealth, they regained in love.